Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to your Escambia County Sheriff's Office. We always look forward to our award ceremonies where we as an agency get to tell our community about the outstanding work that's completed day in and day out at the men and women of the Escambia County Sheriff's Office, both our sworn and non-sworn personnel. So without any further ado, we'll get started. Today we want to recognize the following individuals for their promotions. Charles Dicken to Lieutenant. Brandon Barnhill to Lieutenant. Brian Mulholland to Sergeant. And today, Sergeant Pat Roberts will receive the certificate for Sergeant Mulholland. He had a medical issue that he had to take care of. Patrick Roberts to Sergeant. Renee Reginden to Sergeant. Mikhail Lee II to Sergeant. Jacob Holloway to Sergeant. And Matthew Rowe to Sergeant. Ladies and gentlemen, these are our promotees at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. And ladies and gentlemen, after the award ceremony, for family and friends that are here and you have an award recipient, we'll get things out of the way, and if you want to take photos and everything, again, we encourage you to please stay afterwards. The following employees received a letter of commendation for the third quarter. Deputy Peter Gallion. C-Shift Communications, Kelly Brown, Brittany McNair, Peyton Bell, Karen Jones, Joseph Romano, Julie Weaver, Carla Kunert, and Tina Kafka. The Century Deputies, Sergeant Mark DeWeese, Sergeant Bill Price, Sergeant Scott Mashburn, Senior Deputy Walt Shiver, Senior Deputy James Kelly, Senior Deputy Josh Taylor, Deputy First Class Sean Vestal, Senior Deputy David Bashmore, Deputy First Class James Gillum, Master Deputy Eugene Jackson, Deputy Donald Griffin, Deputy Eric Anderson, Deputy First Class Brent Ates, Deputy First Class Chris Daniel, Deputy Dustin Shaw, and Deputy First Class Ty Bruton, and Deputy John Beard, and Deputy Kyle Haver. Also, Deputy Jake Bandersky and Deputy Walt Shiver. Letters of commendation. Thank you. The following employees received a letter of commendation for the fourth quarter. Deputy Justina Tungle, Deputy Casey Bowling, Deputy Ronald Busby, Deputy Kevin Haddix, Deputy David Ramirez, and I call these the Sheriff's Office Sheriff Reading Test every fourth quarter. Our honorees for the fourth quarter. Thank you. Our following personnel received life-saving awards. Please come forward. Senior Deputy Timothy Hernandez, Master Deputy Matt Clark. Master Deputy Clark is his award to be accepted by Deputy Hernandez. Senior Deputy Tim Hernandez and Master Deputy Robert Clark are commended for their quick, proficient response resulting in the preservation of life. The life-saving medals are awarded for a job well done. Our next life-saving award goes to Deputy Larry Richardson. Deputy Richardson is awarded the life-saving medal for a job well done. The following employees are receiving our Medal of Courage. Deputy Stephen Hussam, Deputy Patrick Roberts, and Deputy Kenneth Bull. On 8/10/17, units responded to Circle Drive in reference to a vehicle submerged in the water with the driver, Angela Clark, trapped inside. Without regard to their own safety, Deputy Patrick Roberts, Deputy Stephen Hussam, Deputy John Zabel, and Deputy Ken Bull stripped off their gear and entered the water along with civilian Dylan Smith. Civilian Dylan Smith broke the driver's side window with a hammer, and Angela Clark was pulled from the driver's seat by Dylan Smith and Deputy Roberts. Deputy Roberts and Deputy Hussam swam Clark to shore, where Deputy Busby, Deputy Bowling, and Deputy Tungle pulled Clark up onto the bank and took turns administering CPR until a pulse was reestablished. Although Clark passed away approximately 1 week later, the officers' extensive efforts allowed the Clark family members to be with her until her passing. It should also be noted that prior to officers arriving on scene, civilians Dylan Smith and Zachary Caudill assisted a young girl ashore who had escaped from the passenger seat of the submerged vehicle. These deputies and civilians are commended for a job well done. Unfortunately, civilians Smith and Caudill could not be here today to receive their civilian service awards. Our next award is a Purple Heart and also our Law Enforcement Officer of the Third Quarter, Deputy Tim Ron Young. On July the 11th, 2017, Deputy Young was investigating a child custody call. The dispute was between a grandmother and her daughter over the custody of a grandchild. Deputy Young was standing on the front porch speaking with the grandmother. He heard a vehicle rapidly accelerating at them from the roadway. Deputy Young bravely made the decision to push the grandmother out of the way. The vehicle struck Deputy Young as well as the grandmother. The grandmother survived the incident due to Deputy Young's alert response. Deputy Young was gravely injured and is still in the healing process. Deputy Young's self-sacrifice and bravery saved the life of a 63-year-old grandmother. This incident was investigated by the Florida Highway Patrol. The suspect was arrested and is currently incarcerated awaiting trial. For placing himself in harm's way and disregarding his own personal safety to save the life of a 63-year-old grandmother, Deputy Young is awarded the Purple Heart and is also our Law Enforcement Officer of the Third Quarter. Our Law Enforcement Employee of the Third Quarter, Kelly Brown. Kelly Brown was working Channel 3 radio on August the 22nd, 2017, in Bolo that a stolen vehicle was taken during a home invasion from the north end. Deputies spotted the vehicle along with another stolen vehicle from earlier in the day that were together. The vehicles took off in separate directions and both vehicles were chased by separate deputies. During this time, the computers froze up and deputies continued to call out their locations. Kelly was able to keep up with two chases going on at the same time while remaining composed. Suspects in both vehicles eventually bailed out and foot pursuits began. Again, Kelly was composed and was able to keep up with both incidents and was able to get canines and crime scene to the locations that needed the assistance. During this track, we received a call of a burglary that had just occurred with a suspect matching the outstanding suspect. Kelly got the information out quickly and another canine track was developed. Kelly was very professional during the entire incident and is to be commended for her part in the capture of all of these suspects. Kelly Brown is our law enforcement officer, our law enforcement employee of the quarter for the third quarter. Kelly, thank you. Our law enforcement employee for the fourth quarter, Angela Muroga. On October the 27th, 2017, deputies responded to the area of Warrington Bank on Barrancas Avenue for a suspicious person causing a disturbance. Upon arrival, they located an uncooperative individual that would later attempt to reach for a firearm and shoot at them. Dispatchers are trained to handle various situations and the unexpected every time they sit down behind the radio. No dispatcher wants to hear the words "shots fired" or "officer injured." On this day, Ariel Muroga came to work not knowing that the deputies she was helping protect would have their lives put in danger by a stranger. Ariel did not hesitate to initiate an officer in trouble signal and immediately had backup officers responding to the scene. At the same time, she was on the phone making numerous phone calls to the bank and also to EMS to get medical attention to the area. During the incident, Ariel never lost sight of what was important. She maintained her composure and throughout the entire incident, making sure her officers were safe while staying focused. Ariel Muroga handled her duties in an exemplary fashion and is therefore our law enforcement employee of the quarter for the fourth quarter. Our law enforcement officer for the fourth quarter, Deputy Josh Teemo. On December of 2016, Deputy Josh Teemo was transferred from the Patrol Division to Investigations to assume the role of a gun response team investigator. Deputy Teemo didn't have any previous investigative experience, but appeared to be committed to learn and willing to work a flexible schedule based upon a caseload. Investigator Teemo was quickly immersed in violent gun crime and gang-related cases without any formal training and took an on-the-job approach to learning what is required to solve such complicated and complex cases. Many times in these cases, the victims are uncooperative, as are the suspects. Over a period of 10 months, Investigator Teemo had worked tirelessly through all his day duties as well as all-night call-outs without complaints. In this short amount of time, Investigator Teemo successfully worked and participated in at least 46 weapon and robbery-related cases assigned to him, resulting in the arrest of 29 separate defendants. During that course of time, he also executed 26 search warrants to recover and/or obtain crucial evidence needed to successfully prosecute the suspects involved. Investigator Teemo garnered the respect of other investigators, and his knowledge gained in the last 10 months is frequently relied upon to assist in unsolved cases. Investigator Teemo's commitment to duty, dedication, and superior work performance as a new investigator is duly recognized, and he is our law enforcement deputy of the fourth quarter. And now we're proud to announce our Law Enforcement Employee of the Year, Kelly Brown. And our Law Enforcement Officer of the Year, Deputy Timron Young. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our formal award ceremony. Again, we ask that all of you stay, and for those of you who are award recipients and have family and friends, we encourage you to please come up front and have photos taken. And again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to your Escambia County Sheriff's Office. Thank you. Nicole asked, how does she tell the difference between something that is real or something that is a scam? Pretty broad question, Nicole, but I'll fall back on some great old sayings. Number one, let the buyer beware, meaning that you should look at any offer with a little bit of what used to be referred to as a jaundiced eye, meaning, I'm going to do a real hard focus on this thing because things are not real clear. And that's a rule that you should use, especially if it comes over telephone, or if you get these offers over your computer system. Con men are very charming and very believable, and they can, the old joke that they can sell a refrigerator to an Eskimo is a true statement. So what you do is a little bit of independent research. The Better Business Bureau is a good clearinghouse for this.
Sometimes the Chamber of Commerce is. One of the good things about online systems is you can also look up, what have consumers reported back on a particular product. But a general rule is if it's an unsolicited, offer for something, please be very careful. It probably is a scam in many instances, and you need to do a little bit of independent research. We don't keep a log of that. However, we unfortunately do, because that's the purview of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, by the way. We refer almost all of those cases to a different agency for investigation because so many of them are international. Sadly, we get a lot of our internet and telephone cons that come out of Canada. And so now we have to cross not only state jurisdictional lines, but international jurisdiction lines in going to another country. And so a case that where a consumer may have been conned out of a few $100s or $1,000, now we can end up spending tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in an attempt to find the perpetrator and to effect a prosecution. So as you can well imagine, most of those, unfortunately, go unpunished. And so it's incumbent upon us as citizens and consumers to practice a little foresight and make sure that we don't become a victim of a crime. It's not hard to sell about someone something that they want. And so if you think that this is a great deal and I've been wanting this, etc., again, sit down, have a cup of coffee, take a couple of deep breaths, do a little bit of due diligence, and again, practice what we preach, and that is don't be a victim of a crime. David asked, are we going to crack down on skateboarding on the Pensacola Beach, I believe, boardwalk? That he had sustained an injury, a resultant settlement. Again, David, I'm going off of what you've told us of possibly $250,000, $250,000. David, as with all things, those are ordinances, that we enforce when we're contacted and when we see that. Quite obviously, we can't be everywhere all the time. In almost all of our instances, because of the shortage of officers that we have, we're in a purely reactive mode, meaning that if no one called and complained about a skateboarder on the boardwalk, there's quite a possibility that we would have never known that and might not have ever known it until you were involved in an injury, and then we responded. So, it's a matter, David, of having a law enforcement officer in every place where an incident could occur. We don't have that now, and to be quite honest with you, we'll never have that.
Question is, I'd like to know how the sheriff believes that medical marijuana will affect Escambia County.
Jenna asked, how do I feel or believe that medical marijuana will affect Escambia County? Well, Jenna, quite obviously it'll affect the state of Florida and not just Escambia County. But to be specific, I've always taken the position on medical marijuana that, and by the way, this is a little bit, I will tell you up front that I'm breaking somewhat with other law enforcement agency heads and professionals. I'm not qualified enough to in any way engage with the medical profession to dictate to them what they should and should not prescribe for medications for their patients. I would not be so presumptuous as to lecture a doctor on medications, any new medication or old medication for that matter. Marinol has been around for a very, very long time, late 60s, early 70s, which can be taken in a pill or a patch form, which is, again, medical THC, which is the content in marijuana. It's a very low amount that is there, and it's been available for prescription for some time, but again, in very limited cases. I think what you're going to see here, and what we fear in law enforcement, is that the passage of medical marijuana is just step one to the final legalization of marijuana. Study after study has proven that marijuana used in the forms that you see on the street, because the THC content is extremely high. A lot of people my age and older, don't understand that the THC content in today's marijuana is nothing like the marijuana they smoked back in the 60s, when marijuana was the drug of choice and it was a craze. And this is where all of the folks that are banging the drum for legalization across the board talk about it's no worse than alcohol, etc. I don't engage in those circular debates. I normally, as I'm doing with answering your question, is go back to the data that I am familiar with, that I have read. So medical marijuana, again, I won't debate that. I think that's left up to the medical profession. I know I find it a little disconcerting that the American Medical Association, the American Ophthalmic Association, And many of those who were brought into this debate will tell you that there's little or no available data to show the efficacy of actually prescribing these drugs. So, but again, that's the medical profession, and if they're having issue with that, then they won't prescribe it, and I pretty much leave it at that. My concern for marijuana across the board is its eventual legalization. I would tell folks to check some of the data coming out of Colorado and some of the states that have basically legalized marijuana, and they have some huge social issues right now. It's much like gambling. There are folks who will benefit tremendously from the legalization of gambling, drugs, etc., and society as a whole suffers for it because who pays for the drug addiction that's rampant? Who pays for the loss of jobs, etc., in the community when gambling comes in and it sucks the life out of your community where all of the other businesses, except for the large casino complexes, go out of business? The local hoteliers, the mom and pop restaurants, and those sorts of things. If you don't work for the large casino, you don't work. And so that's something as a society we need to look at. My approach is I enforce laws, I don't make laws. And so if my community decides to legalize marijuana, I'll do the best that I can to enforce the laws such as they are. Same goes with gambling. My personal preference as to whether I agree or disagree with either one of those things really doesn't matter in this debate. The day that I come to work and decide I'm going to enforce the laws that I agree with and not the ones that I don't is the day I shouldn't be sheriff. The question is, what do report takers do, and basically what are the qualifications? Don't want to get into the weeds, as we say, about report takers and what they do, but the short, easy answer is they allow our officers to remain 10-8, which means on patrol, active in your community, instead of taking time to pull over, write a lengthy report, etc. So what they do is they call in from the basic incident, give the report taker basic details. The report takers can actually assist the officer in looking up the appropriate statutes, what the violation is, etc. And they compile all this while the shift is going on, while the officer remains active in your neighborhood. And then at the end of the shift, they do a quick report review, they approve it, and then it goes to our supervisor. So again, a report taker is someone that relieves an officer of some of the administrative requirements of, again, documenting each and every response that they have contact with citizens and incidents, so they can stay, again, on patrol and active in your neighborhood, returning to the next call. Yeah, I want to remind everyone, and this is an excellent example, that we handle what's referred to as an inordinate amount of calls in Escambia County for a community of our size. Every year, I think we dropped one year to a low of about 243,000 calls for service. Let me repeat that number. 243,000 calls for service. One year we topped out at over 300,000 calls for service. That's more than one for every man, woman, and child in Escambia County. That includes the city, by the way, for that total number. For your specific requirements on qualifications to be a report taker, I would encourage you to, again, contact our Human Resources Department. You can make application online. They will tell you specifically, and they'll give you the outline as how many words per minute that you have to be able to type, what computer systems that you have to be conversant with, those sorts of things. And again, I don't obviously have the HR manual in front of me, so I won't attempt to go down what those qualifications are. But please contact our Human Resources Department at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. They'd be more than happy to assist you in that. Jennifer asked about partnering with our animal control folks in starting a program. I know there's programs in other areas like this where inmates are brought in to not only assist at the kennels, but they refer to them as jail dogs, and the inmates actually help with the care and the feeding and the maintenance and cleanup of facilities, and it's part of their rehabilitation process. Well, of course, again, Jennifer, we don't run the jail. We're not engaged with the detention activities. But I would certainly call your county commissioner and make that recommendation. I know at one time there was a similar program years ago in Escambia County where that was part of a rehabilitation program with inmates where it taught them to be responsible in the caring and feeding of an animal. And of course the county also benefited from the fact that they had additional workers over at the kennels. I know that putting animals down is a terrific thing. My wife and I are both animal lovers. We have a pet. But I can also tell you that sometimes our overpopulation in Escambia County of cats and dogs, and especially cats, can be overwhelming. There are no-kill facilities. The SPCA here in town is a no-kill facility, and so they take a lot of animals in. Some animals will put down because of their breed. The vicious animals that are involved in attacks on humans, unfortunately, are normally put down when they're put into the facility. But we don't run animal control at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office, and so again I would direct you back to your Board of County Commissioners and specifically the Commissioner for your district, and ask them about implementing that program. Yeah, Marie asked the question about school buses and stopping for them, and when you can and cannot pass, or do you have to stop? Marie, the short basic answer is if you're in the lane or lanes traveling behind a school bus or approaching a school bus, if it's a 2-lane road or even a 4-lane road that is not physically separated by a median, meaning that there's a grassy area between it or some sort of concrete abutment, all traffic must stop. If you're on a 4-lane or even a 2-lane highway that has a median separation, meaning that you'd have to drive through or down or over some sort of barrier to get to the opposing lane, you're not required to stop. So if you're behind a school bus and they stop, or you're approaching a school bus and they stop and the flag and the stop sign goes out, if you will, everyone has to stop if you're on the same traffic flow as the school bus. If you're separated from that traffic flow, meaning by a physical median, there is no legal requirement for you to stop if you're coming with the traffic flow in the opposite direction. Hopefully that answers your question. Remember, you can also email your questions and ask the sheriff at escambiaso.com. We'll be back next week right here on Blab TV, Tuesday night at 8 p.m.